name is Sarah, a high school teacher in a small private school in the Philippines. My life was routine-filled with grading papers and planning lessons, until I started feeling like I was being watched. At first, I brushed it off as paranoia, but as days went by, the feeling only grew stronger. I began to notice strange things happening around me, like my car would be moved from where I parked it. My curtains would be open when I knew I had closed them. I started receiving strange messages and phone calls during the night, but the caller ID was always unknown. I was scared, but I didn't want to alarm my friends or students, so I kept it to myself. One day, I was walking to my car after a long day of teaching when I saw a figure hiding in the shadows. I quickly ran to my car and locked the doors, but I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was still there, watching me. I decided to install security cameras around my house, and what I saw on the footage was beyond terrifying. A masked man was stalking me, watching my every move. I immediately called the police and showed them the footage, but they couldn't find any leads. The stalker continued to harass me, sending me cryptic messages and leaving gifts on my doorstep. I was scared to leave my house, and even scared to be there. I felt like I was being trapped like a prisoner in my own home, but the only good part was that he never tried to contact any of my friends or students. I was grateful for that, but it did not ease my fear. One day, I was watching the footages of my CCTV. I realized that the stalker was someone I had known for a long time, but never suspected of having any ill intentions towards me. The realization was even more frightening because it meant that this person knew everything around me and was using that knowledge to torment me. The stalker was finally caught by the police and brought to trial. I testified in court, relieving the terror of those dark days. The stalker was sentenced to prison, but the scars of that traumatic experience still linger with me. I have since moved to a different city, trying to start over and put the past behind me, but the memories will stay with me. Oh, and I almost forgot. The stalker was sentenced 6 years in prison, and his release date is on the first week of February 2023, which happens to be today. Good day, Daetro. My name is Sheila. I stumbled upon your channel after seeing your shorts in my YouTube feed. After listening through your stories, I've decided to share to you a story that has traumatized me ever since. My day began like any other, waking up early to prepare for my office work and departing as soon as I was ready. It was the same routine every day. I work in an office from 12 p.m. to 8 p.m. Nighttime eventually came and my shift has nearly ended. But what I never expected was for it to rain that night. So without an umbrella, I decided to work overtime. It was already past midnight when the rain ended, and soon after, I headed home. I live 3 blocks away from my office, and walking home at night has been a long-time habit of mine. It was a cold, quiet night. The streets were empty that time, and I'm sure it was because of the rain. But the silence was broken shortly by a faint sound of a stranger's humming. I didn't pay attention to him at first, but I could hear the sound of his footsteps echo through the empty streets. I felt extremely nervous. My heart was beating extremely fast and my body was trembling in fear. He gives me an uneasy feeling that made me want to run away at any moment. It was a terrifying scenario. The distance between us has been noticeably shortened by the sound of his footsteps becoming louder and closer. As the humming being much more clear, one could hear his deep and jagged voice humming in a particular tone in a monotone manner. I started walking faster, but the faster I walked, the faster he moved. I knew this even without looking because of the sound of his footsteps and his hums. I kept increasing my speed until I was already sprinting, and right before the moment I ran, he let out a laughter so loud with his deep and monotone voice that made it seem like the devil itself was after me. I almost pissed my pants, and it made me burst out in tears as I continued to run away. I was so petrified in fear, I couldn't even muster up enough strength to scream for help, and all I could think of was running away. I was approaching the block in which I live in. My house was just a corner away, and right after turning, I hit something and fell to the ground. There was a bright flashlight that drove across my face. It was a police officer. He noticed my pale face and nearly swollen eyes from crying. He asked the entirety of what happened to me, so I told them that I was being followed by someone, which put him and his partner on alarm. They didn't hesitate to search and patrol the entire area throughout the night, but they couldn't find a single trace of the stranger. The search later ended and was dismissed as a prank, probably by a drunk person. I myself knew that it was neither of the two. I switched offices and moved to my parents' house. Walking home alone was something I never did again. This happened to me 4 years ago, just before COVID lockdown, but I'd never forgotten the dreary sound of his sinister voice humming. I'm Michael Miller. I'm a software engineer from Virginia. My life was simple and my days are spent with coding at work, video games at home, and Tinder dates during weekends. Yeah, I mentioned Tinder dates. Not to brag, but I kinda look good myself. My life rotated with this routine until I started receiving strange packages in the mail. At first, I thought it was just a mistake, but as days went by, the packages became more personal. I began to notice that the packages contained items that only someone who knew me well could have found, like my favorite mug, or a t-shirt with a joke that only my close friends would understand. I started to receive letters in the packages, detailing my daily routines and asking me to meet the sender. The letters were unsigned, but I could tell they were written by the same person. I was scared, but I didn't know what to do, so I reported it to the cops. But they couldn't find any leads. The packages and letters continued to arrive, and I felt like I was being watched. Like my every move was being monitored. One day, I decided to take the matters into my own hands. I set out a trap, leaving my phone in a coffee table with a hidden camera recording. That night, when the packages arrived, I saw the culprit on the footage. It was a woman I had dated once and ghosted. I thought she would have lost interest if I stopped responding. The woman had become obsessed with me, following my every move and sending me packages and letters. She was arrested eventually, sentenced to prison for stalking. The experience left me shaken, and I have since taken steps to protect my privacy and be more cautious with who I share my personal information with. But the memory of being watched and pursued still haunts me, reminding me of the dangers that can lurk in our everyday lives. Hi, it's me. I'm the stalker, and my obsession with the woman named Katrina began one day when I saw her at a local coffee shop. 5'3", black eyes, long black hair, and wearing a red dress and black heels. I was immediately drawn to her, and I couldn't shake the feeling that she was someone special. I couldn't explain it, but I just knew that I had to get to know her. So I started to follow her. At first, it was just small things, like finding out where she lived and where she worked. I would watch her from a distance, trying to understand what made her tick. I was fascinated by her, and I felt like I was finally discovering something that I had been missing in my life. But as I got closer to her, my obsession grew. I started to leave little gifts for her, small tokens of my affection. I thought that she would appreciate the gestures and would be happy if I started introducing myself. So I went inside her car one day after she parked it and left a note. The note was simple, introducing myself and giving her compliments. But as soon as Katrina saw the note, she started to become scared. I could see the fear in her eyes, and I realized that I had gone too far. But I couldn't stop. I was too consumed by her, and I felt like she was the only thing that mattered in my life. I started to show up at her workplace, and I would call her at the middle of the night just to hear her voice. I was desperate to keep her attention, but instead, I was driving her away. One day, Katrina reported me to the cops, and I was arrested and put in prison. But even then, I couldn't stop thinking about her. I was so consumed by my obsession that I couldn't imagine my life without her. As I sat in my cell, I realized the extent of the harm that I had caused. But I couldn't bring myself to feel remorse. Instead, my thoughts were consumed by a newfound plan to make Katrina mine. I was determined to find a way to escape and be with her, no matter the cost. And if I cannot escape, I will definitely see her after I got out in a few years. I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make her mine, even if it means hurting or destroying anyone who stands in my way. The thought of possessing Katrina, of finally having her all to myself, is all that keeps me going, and I won't stop until she's mine forever. The assassination of John Lennon was a tragedy that shocked the world and marked a turning point in the life of the musician's fans. Mark David Chapman is a notorious stalker who gained infamy for his assassination of John Lennon, the legendary musician and former member of the Beatles, on December 8, 1980, in New York City. Chapman had been found a fan of Lennon for many years, and even owned several of his records. However, his admiration for the musician took a dark turn when he began to fixate on Lennon, becoming obsessed with him to the point of stalking. Chapman was often seen loitering around Lennon's apartment building in New York, even carrying a copy of Lennon's latest album, Double Fantasy. On December 8, 1980, Chapman approached Lennon outside of his apartment building, where he famously signed an autograph for the fan before being shot 4 times by Chapman. Lennon was pronounced dead on arrival at the hospital. Chapman was arrested at the scene and later pleaded guilty to the second-degree murder. He was sentenced to 20 years to life in prison, where he remains to this day. Despite numerous parole hearings, Chapman has consistently been denied release due to the severity of his crime and ongoing threat he possessed to the society. The memory of Lennon lives on, as does the memory of Mark David Chapman, who will forever be known as the man who took the life of one of the most influential musicians of the 20th century. Chapman's case served as a reminder of the dangers of obsession and stalking, and the importance of seeking help if these behaviors become problematic.